Michelangelo believed he had created something special, but he had to wait and see if it would move the masses. In a few moments, he would either be proclaimed a brilliant success or dismissed as a failure. He shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his tunic. In the bottom of each were small piles of marble dust. He squeezed his hands around the powder and rubbed the granules between his fingers. The ritual kept him calm. A scruffy 24-year-old, Michelangelo knew he must look like an unrefined brute to the audience. He was short and strong, with muscles developed over years of cutting into marble. He had coarse black hair, rough hands covered in calluses, and a nose that had been flattened during a childhood scuffle with a fellow apprentice who was jealous of his talent. He didn't care what others thought of his appearance. He washed once a month and wore the clothes of a stonemason, a long linen tunic, baggy pants, and heavy boots. But he had been told that his brown eyes flared with such intensity that most who met him didn't notice his dress or smell. They were usually too taken in by his passion. The archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica, his black robes swishing along the marble floor, glided through the mass of pilgrims. His beak-like nose was close to Michelangelo's ear. He whispered, "Are you ready, my son?" Michelangelo tried to speak, but his voice caught. He nodded silently. As the archpriest murmured the blessing, a cold layer of sweat formed on Michelangelo's forehead and upper lip. And when the archpriest grabbed the rope hanging over the statue, Michelangelo's ears began to ring. He clenched his fists around the mounds of marble dust until his fingernails dug into his palms. The people would probably hate this statue. They wouldn't understand it. They would mock it, curse him. The archpriest yanked the rope. The thick black curtain dropped to the floor, unveiling a colossal marble statue of the Virgin Mary cradling the crucified Christ. When Michelangelo was 6 years old, his mother died in childbirth. He was the second oldest of 5 sons, so she had often been too pregnant to give him much attention, and he'd spent his first 2 years with a wet nurse, as was customary. Although his own mother had been a distant figure, he was bereft when she died. This sculpture was an expression of that pain. A mother and son alone in their grief, locked in a mass of shadow and light, and forever intertwined, yet separated. The white stone gleamed with a high polish. Jesus' body lay limply across his mother's lap. His skin rippled with life recently lost. Mary's gown cascaded to the floor in deep folds, while her serene expression revealed resignation to her divine fate. For the first time, the public was viewing Michelangelo's Pietà. The crowd was silent. He scanned their blank expressions, but he couldn't tell what they were thinking or how they were feeling. His head was pounding, he couldn't breathe, and pressure was building up in his chest. 2 years ago, when the French Cardinal Jean Belair de Langlois hired him to carve a marble Pietà for his gravesite, Michelangelo had already sculpted a few pieces for his own edification, and even been paid for a full-size Bacchus. But he had never received such a high-profile commission. Despite his inexperience, he'd guaranteed in writing that he would carve the most beautiful statue ever produced in Rome. If he were ever going to fulfill his promise of becoming a great sculptor, a statue of mother and son grief was his best chance. For 2 grueling years, he toiled over the gigantic block of marble. He often forgot to eat, drink, or sleep. The first winter he felt ill, but kept working despite the fever. During that first year, Cardinal Belair had often stopped by his studio to check on his progress. The Frenchman had praised what he saw emerging from the marble, but then the old cardinal died. never seeing the completed sculpture and never anointing it a success. Michelangelo will have to rely on strangers to decide whether it was a masterpiece or not. And now, several agonizing moments after the unveiling, the audience was still staring at his creation in silence. Michelangelo pressed his fingernails into his palm. Finally, one red-haired pilgrim fell to his knees. "Grazie, mio Dio." Then a young mother, grasping two toddlers, dropped to the floor in prayer. Soon the entire congregation broke out in praise. Some wept, some sang, some mumbled heartfelt adoration. Others sat in stunned silence, mesmerized by the sculpture's beauty. He had created his first masterpiece. Relief rushed over him. The black dots faded. His vision cleared. When he was a baby, his parents had sent him into the quarries around Settignano to be nursed by a marble quarrier's wife. His first memories were of men digging white slabs out of the earth, the sound of metal hammers clanking against stone, and the taste of marble dust on his tongue. Spending the first 2 years of his life living among those stone cutters and drinking the milk of a quarrier's wife had given him an unquenchable thirst for marble. He had sacrificed his whole life to sculpt. He had no wife, no betrothed, no children, no hobbies. And now he was finally going to reap the benefits of his obsession. "Who sculpted it?" he heard one pilgrim ask another. Michelangelo sucked in a breath and prepared to feel the delicious tingle that would surely run up his spine at the sound of his own name. "Our Gobbo, from Milan," the other pilgrim responded. Michelangelo's throat closed. What had that pilgrim said? Before he could stop it, that name swept through the crowd like the Arno River rushing through the Tuscan landscape after a heavy rain. "Gobbo, Gobbo, Gobbo," the pilgrims whispered, until everyone seemed to be chanting that name. Gobbo, a second-rate hunchbacked stone carver from Milan. Gobbo, whose figures were static and thick, practically deformed. Gobbo, who didn't have the talent to mold the Pieta's pedestal. Michelangelo had toiled his whole life to raise up his family's name through his art, and now those fools were attributing his masterpiece to that lazy, untalented, godless Gobbo. When Michelangelo was still in the womb, his mother had tumbled off her horse and was dragged behind the beast for several minutes. Doctors predicted the babe inside would not survive, but inexplicably, he'd lived. To celebrate the miraculous birth, his parents had bestowed upon him a unique, divinely inspired name, Michelangelo, one who is protected by the Archangel Michael. Surely God did not save him, give him such a rare and beautiful name, and instill in him an unwavering desire to carve marble, only to allow all the credit for his masterpiece to go to that undeserving impostor, Gobbo. Michelangelo was so angry he was dizzy. The church whirled around him, and the ceiling felt like it was caving in. The archpriest, who might point him out to the crowd, was nowhere to be seen. He had to find a way to ensure that no one ever attributed his sculpture to anyone but him. But how? Then an idea popped into his head, so perfect that it must have been sent from heaven. To set God's plan for his life back on track, he needed to inscribe his name directly into the Pietà so no one could ever mistake who carved it. There was only one problem. Michelangelo didn't own the Pietà anymore. It belonged to the church. He couldn't simply walk up to it and start hacking into the stone. Someone would stop him, maybe even arrest him, No. To carve his name into the sculpture, he would have to do it late at night, when all the worshippers were gone, the doors closed and locked, and the priests fast asleep. And to do that, Michelangelo was going to have to break into the Vatican.